Welcome, Piers Morgan, to the Leadership Symposium.
Thank you. I'm sorry I can't be there, but obviously couldn't be bothered.
Well, it may not be a bad thing because actually we had some people who wrote to us and refused to take tickets and you were appearing publicly.
Yeah, but you would have had more people wanting to come than those who pulled out. So actually you would have won over time, but let's not take any risks.
How does it feel? You're like, in our industry, we've got a food brand, Marmite, which you either love or you hate. How does it feel to be the media's version of that?
Well, Marmite, unless I'm mistaken, and your audience knows better than any other, is one of the single most successful long-running brands in the history of this country. So how do I feel about being compared to that? I'm very relaxed about that.
Fantastic. And I guess you do partly encourage people to have a go at you, don't you?
I like to express my opinion. And the problem with the modern era is that there's a kind of Twitter-driven mob. And they decide what the agreed opinion is. And if anyone dares to deviate from that opinion, they have to be howled and crushed into submission. Well, I'm made of tougher stuff. And I will stand by my opinions. If people don't like my opinions, then argue with me and persuade me in a democratic way why I'm wrong. But what they'd rather do is just scream. And it's why I think things like Donald Trump happened and Brexit happened, is that we've lost the ability to just have rational and reasonable debate. If I ran for Prime Minister in this country, I would win simply because so many people would scream that they would forget that I was actually campaigning. And my message to everyone out there is calm down. If you don't agree with me or Trump or Brexit, or anything, just calm down.
But some people have said some pretty awful things about...
You're about to read them, aren't you?
Well, I think I've probably got some of the milder ones here that I can say on camera, but Ian Hislop renamed you Piers Morgan.
Yeah.
You were actually too toxic to put in room 101. What other ones spring to mind for you?
Listen, I get loads of abuse. I don't care. It's like I'm a deliberately polarising public figure in the sense, I think if you express your honestly held opinions, and they are, in my opinions, are what I really believe in that moment. I might change opinions over time, they might evolve, but I'm in the opinion business. On Good Morning Britain, my job is to be opinionated, to stir up debate, to get things fired up for the morning, send you off on your way feeling pumped up. I write columns which are designed to be provocative and get people to think about things and to agree or disagree with me. Almost everything I do, including Twitter, is based around my opinions. When you express opinions, you're going to be polarizing. There'll be people that agree with you and people that hate you. But the answer to avoiding that is to say nothing and to be a kind of supine little pointless morass of flesh that never says anything. I'd rather shoot myself than that.
Do you ever listen to any of the criticism? Do you ever take any of the criticism on board?
I think honestly given criticism where I feel like they've got a good point, you know. I remember an example when Ariana Grande went home after the terror attack in Manchester very quickly, and I felt it was wrong. As the star performer that night, I thought she should have stayed and gone to see some of the relatives and the young kids who'd been wounded and so on. And instead she just flew straight home back to Los Angeles, and I felt that was a bad decision. And I wrote quite a critical column about her, and I got completely pelted for it, but I thought, no, I actually believe this. I think that she could have brought a lot of good to those families by staying and going to see the young kids. And then she did come back about a week later, and she played on this amazing concert, and she did spend a lot of time in the hospital seeing the kids. Now, was she slightly prompted to do that by what I'd said and the furore around it? I don't know. But let's give her the credit, which I did actually. I wrote a column apologising to her and saying, I got you wrong. And I thought she was incredibly gutsy to then go out again in Manchester and perform after what happened before. And I took my hat off to her. So I can change my view about somebody. I don't know her from Adam. But I still think my initial criticism was justified. And I felt my apology when that came for what she later did was also justified. But that's what I mean about having a proper democracy where you can change your opinion depending on what happens.
Where does certainly your perceived self-belief and confidence come from? Where does it come from?
I spent a lot of time with Sir Ian Botham over the years. It probably comes from that. He was my hero. When I was 16, it was Botham's Ashes in 81, and actually I looked to people like him who had this kind of unshakable belief and self-confidence, and he's a mutual friend of ours. But he's somebody that's my idea of the kind of person that made this country great. He's somebody who keeps looking ahead, doesn't look back. He doesn't mope and moan about life's travails. He stands up for himself and his family and his friends. And you know, I think that I come from the slightly old school, I guess, of a family of very strong women. My mum, my grandmother in particular, tough people who have had tough lives, and their response was always to get themselves up off the floor when bad stuff happened and roll their sleeves up and crack on with life. That's just what I was brought up in. And that's the attitude that I have to life. And I think life's tough and it will bring you a lot of knocks. And it's how you deal with the knocks actually can define how you lead your life.
Would you ever admit to ever having self-doubt?
I once admitted I was wrong about something, but I later realised I was wrong about that.
And what about, you've had setbacks in your career. I don't want to dwell on any of those, but how did you
I think your audience might want you to dwell on those.
Well, how did you deal with those setbacks?
Look, I was fired in very ignominious fashion from the Daily Mirror. It was a very personally awkward time for me because my brother was on the front line in Basra in the Iraq War, and we were exposing some of the more rogue element of the British troops who'd been doing bad stuff. The stories were never denied, the pictures were contested, never really got to the bottom of it. But it was a wake-up call. After 10 years of being editor of the Daily Mirror, suddenly I was literally thrown into the street in my shirt sleeves by security and I had to get myself home. Ian Botham was one of the first people who rang me, I remember that, and said, don't worry, you're going to be fine. That was actually a really nice thing for him to do. But I got home and actually it was quite cathartic. I suddenly had none of the pressures of running a big newspaper with all the staff. I was getting a bit bored anyway. And I decided to turn what could have been to some people a disaster, where I was leading the news for 3 days in a shameful, scandalous manner to many people. But I decided instead just to have a great summer. I had my highest batting average ever that year. Played like a god because I had no pressure, no strain. I went and saw friends. I turned my phone off at night and had a great night's sleep. And it was very cathartic and actually a very useful part of my life. And I also learned that old Winston Churchill quote, success really is going from failure to failure without any loss of discernible enthusiasm. And I've always been a glass half full kind of guy. So even when things have gone bad or people perceive them to be really bad for me, I've actually always been fine with that. And I was fine with the Mirror thing. And a few months later, Simon Cowell took me out for lunch at the Belvedere in Holland Park. And he said, I've had an idea for a talent show, and you have 3 judges and a buzzer and whatever. And a year later, I was a judge on America's Got Talent. It became a #1 show on American TV. And I was so glad that I'd been fired from the Mirror, or I'd have still been in Canary Wharf, 20 floors up, pounding a newspaper out every night. Instead, I was doing 2 days work a week for millions of dollars, having a great time. And the message of that is, if you let life's difficult moments suck you down, then you'll just remain sucked down. If actually you see everything, however bad or good, as an opportunity, then I think it's a more healthy and positive mindset.
And you must see that sort of self-correction in whether it's political leaders or people that you interview. Sometimes it's easy to believe your own publicity, and sometimes you need that correction. And you must have observed that in others.
Absolutely, but there is a power in self-belief. Look at Donald Trump. He's a friend of mine and very divisive, polarizing figure. But he's somebody who has a chilling self-belief, and that was able to propel him to the most powerful job in the world. And he was able to beat somebody who most people thought was the most qualified candidate in history. Self-belief's a powerful thing. If you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else? If you don't love yourself to a certain degree, very few people love themselves quite as much as I do, but if you don't actually love yourself to a degree, why should anybody else? I think believing in yourself is a really powerful thing. My mum gave me when I was young, I've still got it. It was a postcard of a hippopotamus flying with a flock of seagulls and the headline, "Ambition knows no bounds." And I've still got that on my desk. And my family's motto has always been that there should be no limit to your ambition. There might be a limit to what you can achieve, but never have a limit to your ambition.
And you do talk about your mother a lot. I've seen you on air, and you often mention your mother, and you often mention what your mother would say about something, and she's going to ring you. She clearly is a very important person in your life.
Hugely. My mum will text me in the middle of a very important interview with the President of the United States and say, "What have you done to your hair?" Or, "What's that tie?" You need mothers like that, My mum's my biggest supporter, but also often my biggest critic, and I like that. I like both. I like the unequivocal support that she gives me. I always said if I murdered 10 people, she'd say, well, at least it wasn't 11. That's a very powerful thing to have behind you. But also I like the fact she's unafraid to tell me if she thinks I went a bit too far. She's always having a pop at me for having a go at Susanna or Charlotte Hawkins. Be nicer. Just be nicer. I'm like, Mum, they're impossible. How can I be nicer to them?
And you mentioned Donald Trump. What other leaders in any walk of life have you been particularly impressed by?
Well, I think that political leaders, Nelson Mandela would be a good example of somebody that when he came out of prison after all those years, he could have taken a view of retribution and revenge and sent South Africa into total carnage and chaos. And instead he went the other way, and he was very forgiving and very inclusive of the people that had persecuted him. And I think that is true leadership. Leadership is being able to actually unite people. My criticism of Donald Trump, and I've told him this, is that I think he should now be in a position where he starts to try and unite America rather than play to the divisions. But he's very much a you punch me, I'll punch you kind of character, and he finds that difficult. I'm hoping over time, particularly if he gets re-elected, which I think he might, is that he starts to become a more inclusive president. But leadership in the end is about bringing people together and about rallying people and about bringing people with you. Winston Churchill, you could argue, single-handedly saved this country in World War II through the sheer force of his confidence and the power of his rhetoric. Leadership's a powerful thing when it's used well. Conversely, the Germans were led by Adolf Hitler, who was clearly a strong leader, but for very evil ways. And so, leadership isn't always a good thing if it's badly executed or has evil intent. But I do think that you look at great leaders over the centuries, whether it's a Churchill, Thatcher, who was very divisive, but was, when it mattered, like the Falkland Islands, a great leader. Leadership can rally countries, it can rally sports teams. Alex Ferguson would be a great example to me of a natural-born winner and a natural-born leader. But you talk to the people that play for him, and they'll all say he was a great guy with the young players, with the staff and everything else. So it's a multifaceted thing. The problem I have with this country right now is there is a shocking lack of good leadership.
Yeah, and I know that as part of that, winning is so critical to you. Where do you draw the line between winning at all costs or winning and accepting you might?
Well, I don't think you should cheat, and I'm a massive sports fan, as you know, and I don't think cheating should ever be acceptable or encouraged. I do think you should play as hard as you can within the rules of a game to win. I do think if you lose, you should show good sportsmanship, and you should take victory and defeat in the same way. You should be respectful of your opponents. But I don't like people that celebrate losing. I don't like it when Wales came third in the European Championships, having bus tours around Cardiff. It's like, really? You came third. I don't think Gareth Southgate was a winner because England got knocked out in the semi-finals of the World Cup. I think if you ask Gareth Southgate, he would say the same. I don't think he'd call himself a winner. He's won nothing yet. He's doing brilliantly, and we had a great win against Spain recently, and that's great. But come back to me when he wins a tournament, and he would say the same thing. So I think real winners hate losing. And my argument about kids in this country is that too many of them are being covered in cotton wool, told that there's no such thing as losing. If you come last, you get a participation prize, you're still a winner. And is that really the way to prepare kids for the rough, tough reality of life? So I say take the cotton wool off and let's introduce kids, or reintroduce them to the kind of mentality I grew up with, which is, losing, you've got to take it. Sometimes you're not as good as other people, but you've got to prefer winning, haven't you? What is actually wrong with winning or wanting to win?
When you answer questions, sometimes your responses seem very spontaneous. I think particularly for our audience, it's how much preparation do you do, say for a show, and what sort of preparation?
Well, I had my brother's a British Army colonel, and he's actually serving abroad at the moment, and his regiment, the Royal Welsh, have an unofficial motto, the 7 Ps. And there are derivatives of this throughout the army. Prior planning and preparation prevent piss-poor performance. So although a lot of it feels like spontaneous and off the cuff, there's a lot of research goes into what we do. And the night before we get sent copious notes about stuff, about the interview guests and so on. We have another update in the morning. And by the time we get on there, we're pretty well briefed for any eventuality with the guests. You have to be. You can't look like you know less than your guests about the subject. Otherwise, you'll get found out by the viewers who'll think, well, this guy's an idiot. So it feels spontaneous, and I love spontaneity, and sometimes things just come to me. But fundamentally underpinning it, with both Susanna and me, I think, is a real journalistic rigour to the research.
One final question, and this is particularly for the students in our audience. There's over 100 students, give them one life lesson that you think is important.
Don't be a snowflake, all right? And I don't, I've got 3 sons of 25, 21, and nearly 18. And I say to them all the time, this snowflake thing is not actually designed to make you all feel bad. It's like, don't be weak, be strong. Look at everything from a position of positivity. Look at things that need to be overcome as challenges which can be fun. Don't let the bad stuff in life suck you down. Winning is not the be all and end all, but it's better than losing. And I think, you obviously, be kind to people, be generous if you can, be good to your family, be loyal to your friends, all those things. But fundamentally, if you're a student right now in this country, allow democracy to happen. Don't ban people from coming to speak at your colleges, universities, because you don't like their views. That way, madness lies, right? Encourage debate. If you don't agree with people, persuade them through the power of your eloquent argument why they're wrong. Don't just lie on the floor screaming, whether it's Brexit or Trump or whatever else you don't like. Students need to be a little bit better than they're being right now. They're being weak, they're being snowflakey, they don't want to hear anyone else's views, they're on Twitter in their echo chambers, and they won't like me saying this, and I'm sure they'll be bristling now in the audience saying, what does he know? Well, I've been through a lot in my life, and what I do know is there's a power that comes from a strong positive mindset. There's also a power from being able to democratically engage with people you don't agree with. And that is the way great countries thrive and prosper. You don't get it by no platforming people you don't like, or by getting on Twitter and saying, I don't agree with you, so I'm going to scream at you until you change your mind. It's never going to work.
Piers Morgan, on behalf of our audience, thank you so much.
I'm just sorry I can't be with you all. I know that you probably are all absolutely distraught. Just try and dig deep and get over it. Show some strength.